Great. Dan, are you ready?
Just this meeting or all of our meetings tonight?
Ready? All right. I want to welcome everyone to the City of Cottonwood Heights, our Community Development and Renewal Agency meeting. We haven't had one for a while, so we're glad to convene today. And this is a work session. It's not an item of action items. And to begin with, we want to excuse Council Member Michael, who is out of town traveling, and wish her well in her travels. We have 3 discussion items. The first item, 2.1, is to discuss the Second Amendment to the project area plan and proposed amended project area budget for the Canyon Center CDA. So, Jason, you going to do that? Jason, you may want to introduce yourself for the record and the audience.
I will do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of the Community Development and Renewal Agency. It is a pleasure to be here with you this evening. My name is Jason Birmingham. I'm with Lewis Young, Robertson, and Birmingham, and we are the financial advisor to the City of Cottonwood Heights and have been working with the city on the Canyon Center CDA project area. My purpose tonight, and I've been invited obviously by you vis-a-vis Tim and Shane. I think there are other elements tonight that they're going to talk about specific to development agreements and some other things, but the 2 documents that I'm going to refer to tonight will generally be considered at a public hearing, which I won't go into a lot of detail. That's why I've provided this watered down version that has a 1-page summary in the front of it and then a rather large spreadsheet attached to it.
The second page kind of counts
Yeah. But it is really summarizing or in reference to the second amended project area plan related to the Canyon Center CDA and then the amended project area budget. And what I was asked to review with you this evening in preparation for this hearing that will come up in December is what has changed. And we have been working quite significantly with many of the taxing entities, as you know, because of revisions to the site plan, because of changes in the market dynamics, and just the overall timing development of the Canyons project, which is in the old Canyon Racket Club parcel. It's taken some time to go back to each of the taxing entities who are participating with us. We view them as important stakeholders. So we've been working with the Canyon School District, Salt Lake County. We've worked with Cottonwood Heights Recreation Service Area and with the Mosquito Abatement District and Central Utah Water Conservancy District, and have had a great dialogue to this point. Although the process has taken some time, there have been some changes, amended changes that they have approved that will be coming to you in course over the next month or so as you consider this plan, the amendment to the plan, and the amendment to the budget. So at a high level, you can see those bullet points that I have on the first summary page. And Tim and Shane thought it might be important and very helpful to you to just kind of go over the major changes that occurred. This project originally was created back in 2011, so you can imagine there's been some modifications. The very first amendment that took place was probably within a span of a couple of months, and it was a base year value determination. Originally, the base year value was almost $9.5 million, and then we realized once the ground got scraped and ready to develop and everything, the new assessed value that the county put on it reduced it all the way down to about $4 million and change, $4.8 million. So the very first amendment was, I don't want to call it minor because that's a big change in base year value, but it really didn't change anything to do with the plan itself, the land uses, the mixture of commercial development, residential, et cetera, didn't change from that first change. But what has changed, and what I've put in the bullet points, are the more significant changes that occurred from what I now refer to as the first amended, which was really the $9 million to the $4 million base year, to now what we have been working with the other taxing entities on, and all of them to this point have approved those. So included in that is the site plan has changed, and I know this body is very aware of those changes as you've seen those over time. But to kind of capture it in summary, initially the density, the magnitude had the taxable value, proposed or projected taxable value, to be an incremental value of about 63 to 65 million. I've mentioned 63 million here. As the market has changed, as the fine-tuning of the development has occurred and the site plan has come back to you in a revised fashion, there's been different mixes of hotel, some single family, which you'll note wasn't originally in the original plan. We always had multifamily, we always had hotel, we always had commercial, we always had retail, but they were in different percentages. The current site plan produces just over $51 million, and that's noted on that spreadsheet attached. As you kind of gloss through the top part of the spreadsheet, it describes the hotel in terms of the number of units was 154 units, and it generates about $16 million in value. And then you can see each line item. You have the office, you have the restaurant, the parking structure, retail, et cetera. If you go a little further down that sheet, you'll notice the incremental value of 51.169 million. So our previous plan, I will call the amended plan, which it was about 63 million in assessed value. Now we're about 51.169 million. One primary reason for that was the original plan, and I think I've discussed this before, is we assumed and believed that the assessed value of a parking structure would be carved out and would also be a taxable asset. When we visited with the county assessor, we explained this before, the county assessor said, well, in a suburban setting, which we still constitute Cottonwood Heights as a suburban setting, there is no value for the parking structure independent of the other assets. And so in their minds, it's already embedded in the lease rates or whatever they come up with the assessed values. So when they looked at this, they essentially said, we don't see that you'll get 11.5 million, even though it's going to cost you 11.5 million. It's already embedded into your assessed value for the office or the retail, et cetera. So I don't know that there's a major shift. We are talking about 63 million initially, now 51, 52 million, but a lot of that, I think, was the parking structure difference. Now, you will recall there were two office components before. We had a 40,000 or 50,000 and an 80,000 square foot office, but the hotel was also smaller. We only had about 100 rooms in the previous version of the hotel. We also didn't have single family homes before. We do now in this plan. We had a few less number of condominium / apartment units. So the retail's gone up a little bit. Some of the others have gone down. But overall, when we kind of equaled out the parking structure, we're feeling like there's probably only a movement of maybe $4 or $5 million in true value change. So that's been noted. We've had those discussions with the school district, with the county, with the other taxing entities. Obviously, their concern was similar to this body that said, you know, that's a concern. We've changed the development. With that said, we're still getting the parking, which is the public amenity that was associated with this, that was the primary objective of the CDA. So that's one major change that the second amended project area plan and the budget will reflect if you compare and contrast that to the original plan. It will be a different site plan, a little bit different values, timing, and so that ought to be mentioned. The second bullet point is a significant one because without this change, so this is the trigger date. This has to deal with when the tax increment would be collected and then distributed to the CDRA. And as you know, we're already collecting it, meaning that the county assessor has collected it, remitted it to us. Heretofore, we have taken those dollars, attributed to the Canyon Center, and we've set it aside, but for some costs associated with, you know, the development of this and putting together the project. But the idea is that when we talk to the taxing entities is that we would set those monies aside. If they were to redo the trigger date, we would just either credit that towards the total participation amounts that the entities would be doing, or we would remit that back to them and start over with a new trigger date of 2021. So that second bullet point in all of the current amended interlocal agreements that we have with all of the taxing entities, move it from tax year 15, which did trigger, to now no later than tax year 21. So it could be any time between now and tax year 21. And so everyone was agreeable to that. Of course, all of this is dependent upon whether this body ratifies those interlocal agreements, but that's what they have agreed to. Any questions on the first two items? I don't want to.
May I comment on that for just a minute? So that trigger date is really important because if you have a project that's not completed and it's still under construction, you're not going to get all of the increment to make the project work and to fund the projects that the public aspects that you need. So moving that trigger date is very important because it gives us time to allow for the project to be completed and then move forward with the increment to do the project. So.
Yeah, and we were asked that specific, I think the school district and the county, and basically by foregoing 4 years on the front end, which didn't generate any tax increment, and for giving those back on the back end of it, it was, you know, the equivalent of several millions of dollars, like $3 or $4 million that would have otherwise gone to the public parking structure. So there was no way to really finance it. So we're really talking about a project that wasn't financeable if we kept the trigger date at 2015 because they're based on the agreements. Some were 15 years, some 20, some 25. But if your first 4 or 5 years of those periods have no tax increment coming in, you never catch up and you're never able to finance it. So that is critical, as Tim mentioned. And I think everybody saw that as a benefit and we're willing to change that.
I know the school district was very supportive of that change.
Yes.
Can I ask one question about that?
Yes.
Because we have some things that are built. What's going to happen with those property taxes that they're assessed maybe in 16, 17, 18 because they're up and going? Those would just be paid under the normal growth for the regular entities, and then their property tax would then, on the trigger date, move to the CDRA.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll remit it back to the taxing.
Right. So the portion that was triggered in 15, 16, 17 has been set aside, will be remitted back to them going forward until if these interlocal agreements are adopted by the CDRA, then it would happen just as you described it. Those taxes between now and whenever you trigger it would just flow through no one would capture them or remit them, and they would just flow through the taxing
Normal
entities
process.
as they would typically do. Then once you get to the trigger date, then we're back to the assessor collects it and then submits it to the CDRA. Yeah, good question. The third item, also, I don't know that it was a huge or major factor, but we also saw another significant loss in taxable value from a base year perspective. So in the process of trying to make sure that we had enough tax increment to finance the parking structure and the public improvements with the park, et cetera, it was recommended and all of the taxing entities approved a further decline in the base year value. So we remember we went from the 9.4 million, then within about 6 months we amended that down to this 4.7 million. Ironically, we couldn't explain it with the county, but when they subdivided all those parcels, instead of aggregating and getting a higher value from 2010 to 2016, it went the other way. So it went from 4.8 million or 4.7 million, excuse me, down to 3.8 million. So you'll note in the interlocal agreements that you'll be considering in December, each of them also changed the base year taxable value from 2010 date of 3.8 million to a 2016 date. Just the reverse, 2010 from 4.7 to 3.8 million in 2016.
A couple of questions here. The way you talked about it gave me the impression that you were saying that base year value was reduced because it needed to be reduced to make the numbers work. Is that what you were saying?
No, I think that it was reduced based on independent county assessors' evaluation of what the property was. And we decided, when we say we decided, when we talked to the other taxing entities and everyone, stakeholders, the county, the school district, et cetera, trying to get back to the 7.75 million loan that would be coming for the parking structure in order to better forecast or be able to pay back that loan amount, it was an advantage to even lower it from the 4.7 million to the 3.8 million. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to suggest that it was arbitrary to come from the 4.7 to the 3.8. That was actually set by the assessor. What we suggested is, since the base year value, and you haven't triggered it yet, you can still reset that base year value and pick up a little more increment that then can go back to the loan. So I don't know if I
I think I understand that. This point has been troubling to me because I think for the average person it doesn't make sense to say that as raw ground in 2010, this raw ground was valued at 4.7 million, and as raw ground in 2016, it was valued at 20% less, or more than 20% less, is really hard to explain. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
So can you give me any way to explain that? It's a very difficult concept.
You can use me as your layperson because I'm new to the CDA and I'm feeling exactly the way Shelton's expressing.
And the only thing I can describe is that the county assessor, through whatever mechanism, determined that in 2010, the value of that 10.5 or 10.9 acres was 4.7 million. It got subdivided, okay? So
But it doesn't generally have the impact of reducing its value.
Right.
Yeah.
So I can't explain that. Yeah. But when they reevaluated it, so they sent out a commercial appraiser again. So, you know, if you put it in the context, when they appraise property, they're on a 5-year cycle typically. So we're assuming in 2010 they went out, looked at it, it's scraped. It's probably not completely at that point entitled in terms of land use and everything, but maybe pretty close. So they assessed it based on the commercial appraisal. They came back and said it's $4.7 million. In 2016, they go through their cycle, send out a commercial appraiser. It's been subdivided. It now has some entitlements associated with it, and it's $3.8 million. So I can't answer your question of why. I can answer that it wasn't a function of our numbers. It wasn't a function of what we desired to happen for the CDRA. It was just a function of what the assessor valued it at. And so it's probably great.
Sorry, Jason,
Sorry.
if you think back to the timing as well, 2010, we were coming out of the 2008 crash, and then it steadily climbed up until 2016. So to say that property took a decline, it's really hard to swallow.
It is. Now, I will say, we've done other projects throughout the state, and it's interesting when you talk about the recessionary effect. When you look at property tax values, it didn't hit until 2011 and 12, even though our recession was 2008, 9, a little bit into 10. In terms of actual property values assessed, we've seen this in St. George area, we've seen this in other parts of the Wasatch Front, Weber County, Davis County, because we were similar, like, well, that doesn't follow the trend. So we don't know if that's because people then, because of the financial recession, it took a while for them to contest or to challenge their property values, and that had a correction, or it's just the cycle timing of when they get back to reevaluate projects. But we did see the declines in property values more significant in 11 and 12 and not directly correlated with the recession of 8 and 9, at least in terms of property values.
But again, what you're emphasizing is that this value is not set by an arbitrary means. It's done by the county assessor through a contract with a commercial appraiser. Is that what it is?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So we there was no, and it could have been, a property owner.
It just seems like there's a mistake. I mean, just to be frank, it seems like there's a mistake there.
If I may add, I agree with Jason, this is not uncommon. This happened in other areas I was in where the values, nothing changed with the land, but the assessment of that, it dropped that base value. And so this is not uncommon from my perspective either, even though I can't explain why.
Between 10 and 16, you've seen that?
Yeah.
I mean, in that window, that's a really good window for property values generally, so.
But I can't explain it either, and that's something maybe the assessor could help us out with.
We did sit down with the assessor, but in fairness to them, their answer was it's part of our cycle. We evaluate property as frequently as minimum of 5 years. Every 5 years we look at it. We try to refactor or factor properties every year if we have a reason to do it. But they try to be fresh enough every 5 years that they're doing, in essence, a commercial appraisal of it and then factoring it in. Now, there's a lot of factors when you come up with your property value. There could be property owner that says, I don't think it can be valued at $4.7 million because the income stream isn't such that generates $4.7 million, so how can you do it? So the assessor
Any property owner can go and ask for a reappraisal or
and we don't get the benefit of that because that's not disclosed to us of, was it a property owner who, challenged that, or was it just part of their cycle? When we did meet with them, they just said, 2010 it appraised at this, and 2016 it appraised at that. Well, we saw that and said, well, great, that's lower in 2016. If we're not going to trigger this yet, can we go back and use that as the base year value? All the taxing entity says, let's use that.
Okay, we have about 15 minutes, so any further questions on that bullet?
Just one quick comment. That doesn't necessarily, that actually could be a benefit to the other tax-paying entities because most of them are 75% or 30% of what they will still retain of the incremental taxes. So that gives them a larger portion of the tax increment that would be coming back to them. Did I say that? That makes sense? Because they're not turning over 100% of the incremental taxes to us. Most of our agreements are for 75%. So by lowering that 25% that's going to continue to go to each of the taxing entities, that portion's a little, that gross dollar amount's larger.
Yeah, I think that's true, although it's either going to be on the base year, which they already get passed through to them, or the 20%, 25% that passes through. You'd get 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But the point is The lower taxable value is the base year value was established by the assessor. We used that 16 value. When we talked to the county, it helped them too because it helped to pay back the loan amount. Now, when I talk about helping pay back, we're talking about a fraction, like it's less than $100,000 in the total scheme of what the base year value means, but it was something that the taxing entities feel comfortable with. I'm certainly willing to go back to the assessor, have some more discussion and dialogue, but
It's not the normal conversation the assessor has.
Yeah,
Hey, we think you've appraised us too low.
yeah.
Or they may have praised it too high initially.
Yeah,
It's
maybe.
could be just a correction, yeah.
Yeah, they could have said, you know, there wasn't really merit in 2010 to come up with a $4.7 million value and then brought it down. Anyway,
All right, let's
that
go
was a
forward.
change in the interlocal agreement. The last two, and I won't take a lot of time on those, but I think this is helpful to know. There were some considerations made by both Canyon School District and Salt Lake County. So the first three that I mentioned were all uniform changes. So every taxing entity agreed to the change in the site plan, the mix of development, the tax increment trigger date from 2015 to 2021, and the base year value reduction from 4.7 to 3.8 million. But only two of the taxing entities asked for a couple of additional conditions. So the first one's the Canyon School District. One of their major policies that they have established, and it's district-wide for them, so it didn't matter if it was Cottonwood Heights, Midvale, whomever would be bringing them a project. They have just made a policy that they won't give tax increment off of single-family residents. And so they felt like since they were amending this, they were comfortable with the project, like the public parking structure, like the dynamics of what's being proposed, but policy-wise, they just didn't feel like they could give tax increment from single-family homes that were in the area and support the public infrastructure. So through a negotiated process, they agreed to strip that off, and it's reflected in the budget, the spreadsheet budget here. They would have stripped that off, but they would add enough time onto the end of it. So they were originally 20 years at their percentage, 70%. They said, hey, we'll give you 4 or 5 more years so that you get the same net present value equivalent. Our idea isn't to negotiate backwards on the dollar amount, but from a policy, we don't want to set a standard that people can come and use tax increment off of single-family homes. We felt like that was a reasonable change, and so we made that. So you will notice that in the Canyon School District, that will be one of their provisions that is in there. The last one is the county. So this was a change too, where they were at 100% for 18 years. They said one of their main goals, because of how the funds are coming in, their transportation funds that they're going to use for the parking structure and the loan, they ultimately were looking at the bottom line and saying, well, it doesn't look like we quite pay back a full $7,750,000. And we said, well, we can't get any more from any other taxing entity. We're all in, everybody's supported. Well, the county came back and said, well, change ours then from 18 years to up to 23, 24, 25 years like the school district did until we reach the $7.75 million total repayment. And so that was a thing that we acknowledged as well and said, okay, it's your dollars paying yourself back. We certainly would be willing to approve that.
Well, Jason, I think it's important to note and show appreciation to the county for willingness to increase not just those years, but the loan amount from the 6 million to 7.75, which then created an additional 1.75 that we could retain for.
We have flexibility now
Yeah.
to use that for other
Right.
needed projects in the community.
Right.
So, we felt like that was a win-win project. So, really, those are the significant changes and differences. Of course, in December, you'll hold a public hearing on the second amended plan and the budget. Associated with that would be consideration of the interlocal agreements with each of those entities that I've mentioned. So Any other questions on that, or feel free to call me if you start looking at this and aren't quite sure what one of these items meant, or I can walk through the cash flow if that's helpful at some
Real
point
quick,
as well.
Jason, on that bullet point number 1, that decrease of 12 million, how much of that is attributed to the county's assessment, or is it the developer's assessment?
That's a good question. So of the roughly, I'm saying $11 million, about 4 million of that, 5 million of that was the parking structure, which wasn't going to be assessed. So it wasn't the full 11.5, because some of it we did build into the value of the project. So I would say 4 million of that 11 million, maybe 5 million of 11 million is just because the parking structure. The other amount, 6 or 7 million, is a reduction in the developer's overall deliverable.
That was kind of hard to swallow, because wasn't the whole intent of the tax increment that they were going to build a substantial development and then we're going to profit from that tax-wise in the long term? So for them to come back and say that it's decreased 8 million in value overnight,
Right.
it's hard.
I agree with that in part. One other factor I would mention, though, is that the incremental sales tax and the municipal transient room tax and so forth associated with the new site plan is far more than it was with the previous. So there's more concentration of retail. There's a lot more hotel rooms than there was originally. So I think from a property tax perspective, you're absolutely correct. I think the 63 million, even if you net out 4 million for the parking, would have produced property tax a little higher, but it's offset by a lot more transient room tax, municipal transient room tax, sales tax associated with the retail, which was far more in the second site plan than it was in the initial one. So it's offset, but you're right, on the property value side itself, no, it went down. We did pick up some more other revenues.
The primary public benefit of the park and the parking structure, those are very well established. We didn't lose 20% of that.
No. I think you've seen that, the 417 total structured parking, and vast majority, 80 some odd stalls are completely for the benefit of the public, and then there's another 200 plus that are available during certain periods of time. So that concept of shared parking and the public benefit hasn't changed. No.
Okay, any further questions I guess? If not, let's move to item 2.2, the status of the Canyon Center development agreement and other documentation. And Mr. Tini, you going to handle that, or Shane? Okay, Shane, you're up.
I'll go ahead and just take a couple of minutes to give you an update on this. As a reminder, in April of this year, the board gave the go-ahead on this transaction that we had been negotiating and trying to document for the preceding 7 years. And so over the spring and summer and into the fall, we did several things. One was we finalized what I call here on the sheet that's been given to you, the regime documents, including the development agreement, and then most notably for the city and the public parking easement agreement that will give the parking rights in the project. And then we also were working with the various taxing entities to amend their interlocal agreements, as has been described by Jason, to change the trigger year, change the base value, and things like that. That took quite a while. There are 6 or 7 different taxing entities, each of which needed a separate amendment, and each of which had its own issues. The form of those amendment documents was approved in the April meeting, and so those were another thing that we did. And then another thing we did over that period of time was we completed drafting and finalized the construction loan documents. As you know, the agency is going to be taking the $7.75 million that it's receiving from Salt Lake County and turning around and loaning that to the developer to construct the parking structure and other infrastructure on the project. And that requires a robust set of loan documents, including a loan agreement, a note, trust deed, and various other documents. So those documents also have been finalized. There's one that needs a few final tweaks, but it's nothing major. We'll get that done over the next few days. There are also some related intercreditor documents. There's a first lien holder on this project that we've had to come to agreement on how the various security positions are handled. And so those documents have all been agreed to and signed by this other lender. And so that's what we've been doing. I guess I would say since April, the biggest change that has occurred to the documents, to the transaction, is just the increase of the county's funding from $6 million to $7.75 million. In April, we believed that the agency was going to have to use $1.75 million of its own funds to fund this construction loan. But over the summer, the county has agreed to increase its amount, so the agency will retain its $1.75 million in funding and be able to use that for other purposes. And I've understood that that was something that was desired by the agency board, and so we have made the changes accordingly to the documentation. So on December 18th, we will be holding the public hearing on the second amended project area plan and the amended project area budget as required by statute. And then that same evening, we're proposing to put before the agency board and the city council as needed approval of that second amended project area plan and budget, as well as approval of the amendment documents with Salt Lake County where their funding is increased, and ratification of the various CDA amendments to the CDA interlocal agreements with the taxing entities. And then once we're at that point, we'll complete noticing required for the plan and budget amendment, and we'll be able to go ahead and enter into get the funding transferred from Salt Lake County and go ahead and finalize the documentation, get things recorded, and start funding the construction loan. So any questions?
Council, or the board, I should say, the agency. Tim, any final comments? Okay. The last item, 2.3, before we adjourn, and Shane, maybe you can explain, because this is something I'm not sure everyone's aware of how minutes are approved.
Well, when we have public bodies in the city that meet infrequently, well, let me back up and say, when we have public bodies in the city, such as the city council or the planning commission, that meet frequently, then minutes are prepared and they're circulated, and they're subsequently approved by voice vote at a following meeting once everyone's in agreement that they reflect what happened in the meeting. But when we have public bodies like this agency that meets infrequently, we need to get minutes approved sooner than the next meeting may be occurring. And so we have formulated this procedure where minutes for a meeting are then prepared and circulated to the members, and they're allowed to give feedback, and ultimately, once everybody is satisfied that things are as they remember from the meeting, why then those meetings are deemed approved.
Thank you. Any further discussion with respect to tonight's agenda on our CDRA agency meeting? Hearing none, I'd move for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned. So to the audience, we'll start our City of Cottonwood Heights business meeting in just about a minute, as soon as Paula tells me ready to go, and one of our council members just left for a minute, so. Yeah, good reminder that if you would like to speak to the council during public comments, as you come in near the clock, there's a comment card you could fill out if you would, and I'll be calling your names up individually, so we have some order and record of those who are speaking. And once you fill out those speak cards, if you'll hand them to Dan to my left, and he'll bring them up to us. So again, if you'd like to speak today to the council, please fill out a speaker's card and turn it to Dan. Everyone's welcome to comment. Don't be shy. We'll wait just a minute as people fill out cards. Okay, Paula, are you ready? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's Cottonwood Heights City business meeting. It's Tuesday, November 27th. It's just after 7 o'clock, and we have a fairly light agenda, but we appreciate everyone's attendance. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll ask Councilman Shelton to lead us in that pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag. Okay, if those have looked at the agenda, the first item on the agenda, which we always appreciate, is an opportunity for our citizens and constituents to give us public comment, and we'll move to that right now, and I'll just call you up by name. We'll begin by Catherine Peterson, if you want to come up. I know I saw her. Oh, there she is.
How did I know you'd call me first?
It's on the top of the list.
Oh, cool. Awesome. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council. Where's Christine?
Oh, you know what? I appreciate you mentioning it. I did mention it in our prior meetings. Christine is out of town traveling, and she should be excused this evening. She's actually in Colorado on business.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She should be excused. I apologize for not doing that at the beginning of this meeting.
Okay. My name is Catherine Peterson. I bought my home here 3.5 years ago. I am a musician, a former member of the Utah Symphony. I have performed 3 times in Carnegie Hall with Yo-Yo Ma and others. I owned and ran my own music performing company in the Los Angeles area for 25 years. I play violin, piano, and I compose. My original compositions play worldwide for millions of people on Apple Music, Spotify, and Pandora Music, where there's a station called Catherine Peterson Radio. So I am used to being heard.
I love Pandora.
Thank you. Well, there's a station called Catherine Peterson Radio.
I'm going to check it out.
It's very relaxing and ethereal. I have a positive vision for the future of Cottonwood Heights. I see it as a city that is functional and one that is compassionately addresses the needs of all residents over special interests, greedy developers, and hidden agendas. I have a few questions for the council and the new business manager, Tim Tingy, who I have not met yet. What is the cost to the city for code enforcement taking 3 years and 3 months to get a nuisance noisemaker to cease and desist? What is the cost for the city for code enforcement taking 15 months on another noise nuisance issue before taking any action whatsoever on a Nantucket Gate noise nuisance? What is the cost of hiring a prosecutor, Tucker Hansen, to come all the way from Pleasant Grove to hurriedly look at a case using the wrong decibel limit of 100 being illegal, when the illegal decibel limit for my particular case is only 80, per Salt Lake County Health Department Regulation 4.7.6. The decibel measurement of the infamous RC car case, which has dragged on for 16 months now, was 82, which was illegal. And Mr. Lovato incorrectly took the decibel measurement. The case was rammed through in too much of a hurry only after I threatened to sue the city for not enforcing code in a professional, fair, and time-efficient manner. The case was not conducted in a transparent fashion using the correct health department regulation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll be back in touch. Debbie Tyler.
I would like to thank you for your service. Having a husband who was a city councilman, I know that there's a lot of hard work and tedious business items that you must go through, and also lots of complaints. And so thank you all for your service. My husband T had to support my granddaughter at her basketball game and wishes to say this. If any member of our city council is going to vote against Chief Russo's employment renewal, I would ask them to explain publicly with evidence why they are doing so. I support Chief Russo and the CHPD. They are professional, effective, responsive, and caring. Enough of that soliloquy. I will now read mine. I am here tonight to advocate for our police department. We have watched a drain of experienced and talented employees since January of this year leave. That needs to stop now. These are security and jobs for the city staff. Council positions are temporary as to electability. In the recent past, I have experienced several unsolicited conversations about our police. One friend got her car stolen out of her driveway. They came home from a trip and I guess they left the keys in their car. At any rate, the next morning their car was gone. That car was found by our police, out of the city, actually. And she said, thank you so much I'm so thankful for the police. Another one was telling me about her 2 large decorative pumpkins who were stolen from her yard, quickly returned. Both of those did not know anything about this and still don't. This is something that has happened within the last few weeks, maybe 6 weeks to 2 weeks. The third is, it was late at night, and T and I were just getting ready to retire to bed when our doorbell rang, and a policeman came to our door and said, "Both of your garage doors are open." The week prior to that, T had had his golf club stolen out of our garage in broad daylight. I was working in the garden, going in and out, and Robbie Russo returned those golf clubs to us. We found out the man had had over 40 theft arrests. Okay, so I really appreciate our police, and I think the vast majority of our citizens really appreciate Robbie, Paul, and our force. Safety was the #1 concern in a past survey. I believe that the general population of Cottonwood Heights is not aware that there's even a question about his contract. And if there were, there wouldn't be this few people here. There would be hundreds of people who are here because crime is not going down. So it's time to put aside personal agendas, show support for the men and women who put their lives on the line for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Schwartz. Ed?
Good evening. Nice to see you again.
Yes.
Saw you earlier today.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I've been a resident of Cottonwood Heights for going on 14 years, and I applaud our police department. I applaud our city and the governance of our city, but I think it's time to run our city in a much tighter manner than we have. Recently, we've raised taxes, needed to. And now we're talking about renewing a contract for Chief Russo, which of course should be on the agenda, and it's an important item. Having worked for publicly traded companies, private corporations, and investors, I find it imperative that at all costs, proper departmental reviews are conducted in a timely basis, either semi-annually or annually. When working for a publicly traded corporation, as a vice president of missions and marketing, I was reviewed every 3 months for my performance for almost 10 years. I feel that this item on the agenda to renew a contract when it does not expire until June of next year is rushing through the gate without proper due diligence. And it is incumbent upon our leadership to review this and say yay or nay. I'm not here to say yay or nay, but I'm here to implore you to take a look at the way you're moving this through. It is not fair to the public. In light of what has gone on with the public regarding our police department over the last several years, the noise that has been created, I'm not saying that there isn't crime in our city. I've reviewed all the statistics. I understand that. And we've done a good job in holding it down. But we're talking about a department of more than 50 people and a leader that you want to rush through on a new contract more than 6 months before it expires. My question to the council and the mayor, is it fair to the public to push through this without proper departmental review and a real questioning from the public, rather than putting it through in a rushed agenda? That's the real question here. Not Chief Russo's performance tonight, not his ability to perform, but the council's ability to perform in a proper manner for the public service that you've been elected to. And by renewing a contract when it does not expire until June of next year is pushing the agenda for self-interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Nancy Hardy.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm just going to talk about the ADU
That was on our
bringing
agenda
up a
recently, yeah.
past ghost. I don't know if you remember those packets I handed out back in April. I don't know if if anybody's had a chance to look at them, but they consisted of town hall minutes, planning commission minutes, city council minutes, and ADU public comments that were sent to the city. Some citizens were for it, some against it, but most citizens had concerns and questions. Traffic, cars, noise, parking, not being enforced, not being controlled, etc. So I just want to know what specific things has the city done to address the comments and questions of the residents? Because I know it's coming up again. So I'd like to know specifically. And some of the restrictions that I gave you the packet that other cities have done, no more than 2 people can live in an ADU. They restrict the size of an ADU, restrict the number of animals, limit the number of ADU permits that they give out a month or a year, limit the concentration in an area. A house must be at least 5 years old before an owner can apply. Get consent of property owners within 300 feet because it affects everybody. And some of the enforcements that other cities use, $1,000 fine for each day that a violation is committed. An ADU cannot be detrimental to public health and safety or introduce unreasonable privacy impacts to immediate neighbors. So anyway, I feel it would be responsible city planning to have tighter restrictions up front and then loosen later if necessary, as need be. Any new ordinance should consider what impacts may be associated with ADUs and provide regulations and processes that respond to the public's input, council direction, and staff research findings. So yeah, I would just like to know what the council has done to address the questions and concerns. And also short-term rentals are 30 days. Long-term, as I understand, is 31 and over. But I do know for a fact some people rent out a house or part of a house for 2 months or, during the ski season. So that's kind of a short-term rental, even though it's not defined as a short-term rental. But if people were just renting every couple months, anyway. And one of the quotes that one city put out there was, "Real estate's new gold rush, head scratching over granny flats begins to draw blood." So.
All right, thank you, Nancy. And just for the audience information, we've kind of taken as a general mode of operation not to get into a dialogue with every public comment because we would be here all night, but I want you to be assured that we're taking notes on the employment cards or with our city manager, and we'll be getting back in touch with those who had appropriate questions that we need to follow through on. So appreciate your understanding on that. The next person would be Kelly Bollinger.
I'm Kelly Bollinger. Most of you know me. I have lived in this city for 25 years, way before it was the city. I remember the awful police that we had through Salt Lake County. It was not until Police Chief Russo took over that things straightened up. Before, Mill Hollow Park is at the end of my street. We would call if there was something going on over there to the Salt Lake County Police. We were lucky if they ever showed up. Since Police Chief Russo has taken over, they are there within 5 minutes. I would hate the thought for special interest people to not approve Chief Russo's contract again, simply because they have their own agenda. I do find it very interesting that a certain councilman is always touting that she wants things to be transparent, and yet she is not transparent with the public. As a bar owner, Tally Bruce does not represent the entire area that she's supposed to be representing. She has told at the meeting that she had with a group of us in July that she came in wanting to represent those that were underrepresented. We tried to remind her that she is supposed to represent everyone, and I'd like to remind her of that again tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sheila Jennings.
Hi, I'm Sheila Jennings. I live in District 3 in Talley's district, and I've lived there with my husband for 26 years. I'm here tonight to comment on renewing Chief Russo's contract. As you probably can guess, I love Chief Russo. My husband knows, and I love our police department. I love our response time. I love the things that I've seen that have changed under Chief Russo's leadership, and I love his leadership style. I read on Mrs. Bruce's Facebook page the proposal was she wants to delay Chief Russo's contract renewal in order to do a review or an evaluation. When I worked for the police department, my boss, Paul, evaluated me every day. And when my yearly evaluation came due, there were no surprises. It was just a documentation of things we had talked about all year long. Don't you evaluate Chief Russo every Tuesday when you have your council meetings? Don't you know what he does for this city and for each individual? And the request to delay his renewal for an evaluation really reminded me of last summer when we came here and you wanted to delay the, it was the budget, the budget qualification, and look into maybe going back to the county. And I just view this as another attack on our police department to demoralize them, and I don't want to lose anybody else. We've already lost some good officers. I don't want to lose Chief Russo. I know Riverton might be looking for a chief. I don't want him to go there. I want him to stay here. I want him to feel like we support him, that we appreciate him, and that he's worth every dime that he gets.
Thank you, Sheila. Sean, is it Ferry? Ferry.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sean Ferry, and I live in your district, Talley. I don't know Ms. Jennings, but I agree with every single thing she said, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the police department and Chief Russo, and let you know that there is a lot of support for Chief Russo, and I think it would be a tragedy if we lost him. Since he started here a number of years back, it's been huge improvements in response times and decrease in crime in our city, and I think it has increased the morale and the comfort level of the citizens here. I think it's unfortunate that we have to be revisiting this issue again, but I'm happy to come back as many times as we need to in support of Chief Russo and our police department. I've lived here for over 40 years and in Cottonwood Heights. So I have a pretty good feel from being young and growing up here to my age now to have an idea of what's going on in our city and see how things have improved. And I think it would be tragic to disrupt something that's working and something that's going well. You don't fix things that are not broken. And as far as costs go, I think it would be also very sad if we're trying to pinch our pennies if we have to spend more to recruit someone to replace Chief Russo and other officers who may leave with him when we've got someone who's doing a fantastic job right now. And so I just want to be sure that that is on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Diana Schaefer.
My name is Diana Schaefer, and I'm a resident of Cottonwood Heights. And I'd like to speak for people who maybe are afraid to come and talk because they're actually afraid of the police. And there are some of those people, or who complain that the police have been harassing them. One that I know of that I could probably mention because he actually moved from Cottonwood Heights. He says he escaped Cottonwood Heights. He complained frequently about his children being, or his son being harassed by the police. And when I asked him about this, he said, and I quote, "The abuses, including budgetary, of Russo and Cullimore are now evident and have to be paid for. That cabal was reelected multiple times and drove Cottonwood Heights further into debt without any decrease in crime or increase in safety." I've lived in Cottonwood Heights for 10 years. I don't know if what Utah Attorney Ed Flint had to say there about his experience in Cottonwood Heights is true or not. None of us do until we do a review. I think it's prudent, and I think that it's in the best interest of the public to actually review what's going on before we make any extensions. And I apologize if that seems offensive to you, and I wasn't intending to be rude when you came up to introduce yourself earlier. I just felt a little intimidated. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. James Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, we moved in here in Cottonwood Heights in 1985. I have operated successfully 2 businesses since 1987 here. If you look around, first of all, my volunteer job with the city now is a co-director of Neighborhood Watch. So I get a chance to work with the police department a lot. And I get a chance to work with Robbie and Paul a lot. And what has always impressed me is the manner in which our officers act, their honor, their integrity, their dedication to their duty, the way that they control themselves in public. They are not officers when they come to my neighborhood watch party. They're friends. And they're not just friends to me, they're friends to everybody. Being a business owner, that does not come from the bottom. That comes from the top. That isn't something that people just grab onto. That has to be taught to them by example. And our chief does that. It would be a shame if we wasted him. I don't know of a more honorable man. He has treated me as a friend, as he treats everybody. It would be a shame. And if it does lead to that, some of you need to rethink what you're doing up there. You really do. I have talked to several people in the 3rd District. The only negative contact that I've had is people who were sorry they got caught, not committed the crime. And that might be the tail wagging the dog, but at the same time, just about everyone I talk to is dedicated to our police department and to who runs it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Pat Saltzman. Oh, yeah, I know. Sorry, didn't know that name for a minute.
Hello, my name's Pat Salzman. I've lived here 5 years. I'm from North Dakota. And I came here to talk about snow removal. So I know a little bit about snow removal because it's usually deeper than I'm tall. But what I would like to just make a comment was, I feel as though there should be a plan to remove snow. Last year on a Sunday, we had 304, 301, 305, and 306 and 400 trucks come by 7 times in one day, and they were just shooting sparks. There was nothing. They're just wasting time. The last snowfall, we had, again, 305 and 306. They were there from 7:37 in the morning till 11:41 on that little itty-bitty tiny snow we had that melted in my driveway. The other thing is when they do remove snow, they go down the street so fast that if you've already shoveled your sidewalk, they're blowing it right back on, and they go so many times that all you're doing all day long is cleaning out the driveway. In North Dakota, we had gates on the snowplows, and when they went by a driveway, they put the gate down, and then they'd pick it up and go on the other one. So I just would like to see some grid or some way that's saying, okay, these trucks have been here, they've removed this snow, now move on and don't come back. So last year they did ours. We kind of live in a half circle type thing. And one side street they never ever plowed. They plowed my street 5 times, but they never plowed the side street because there's no accountability. So I just would like to see some kind of a plan for this because I feel like they're wasting time, money, effort, salt, gas, everything else you want to talk about. So just my comment there. Just the other comment on the police department. I talk to the police officers here, and I've never had a bad experience with them. But I don't see where the big deal is to do a review on somebody and their job. We're not saying that. I'm assuming you're Officer Russo? Okay. My name is Coswella Hockenbacher, and I live in Holiday. So, but I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying is why can't we do a review? What's the big deal to do a review and say, okay, we've done due diligence. This man is doing an outstanding job, or you're not. Again, Holiday, don't forget that. And then, go from there. I don't feel like we're saying he's bad or the police department is bad, because I talk to the police department, the police officers all the time. No, not on cuffs and going to jail. I just like to socialize with them because they're good people and they're taking care of us. That's not what we're saying, that they're not good people. We're not saying you're a bad officer. We're saying, let's do our due diligence. That's all we're saying. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, Pat, and I'm sure on the snow removal, someone will be back in touch because we do have a plan. We'd love to show it to you. Sure. Okay, Carol Lawson.
Hello, I'm Carol Lassen, and I have lived in Cottonwood Heights, raised my children here since 1974. Anyway, and I've seen a lot of things happen in Cottonwood Heights, and I have seen that being made into a city has been a wonderful thing for us. Having our own police force has been a wonderful thing for us. We have really benefited. I know you've already heard, I have had my neighbors tell me how they have had great response times, all those kinds of things. I want to just tell you what a great ambassador for Cottonwood Heights Police Chief Russo and his police force have been. We live in an area in Cottonwood Heights that we have a celebration on the 4th of July every year. The police have taken their time when they weren't out chasing criminals, of course, but they've taken their time to come and socialize with us, lead our little kids' parades. They have been there to show that you don't have to be afraid of the police, that the police are there to be your friend, and they've given a really positive image to the children and our teenagers, that these are people who care about you, that they are people to be respected. They have behaved in really great manners and really positive ways. Personally, I have not had an experience where I have needed to have the police come to my home. Thankfully, I attribute that partly to the fact that our police are doing their job. They're patrolling. They are taking care of us. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that they take care of all of us. And I was at the meeting where Tally Bruce told the group that she was representing the people who had not been represented before, but I hope that she will consider representing me too. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Lynn Krause? Oh.
Good evening, Lynn Krause, District 2. I just have a few bullet points I'd like to make. Number one, I want to start off that while my name is Lynn Krause and I live in Cottonwood Heights, that I fully support our police department, the work they do, and the sacrifices they make. Now I'm going to go live in Holiday, like Pat. I also fully support giving our new city manager the time to assess city departments before having to make any contract renewals. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Third thing, I do not support the false narrative that's being perpetuated by current and former city leaders and some of our citizens this evening, that just because someone questions how our tax dollars are being spent or how our city is being run, that somehow means we don't support our police officers. That's just a false narrative that's being perpetuated that is just totally inaccurate. Good city leadership would nip that false narrative in the bud, let our employees know they have nothing to worry about. This is just a part of doing business, and don't fuel the flames or fan the flames or whatever. I mean, it's part of doing business. That's the way it should be. Fifth thing, I just think it's wildly inappropriate for the former mayor to be interjecting his biases into current city business. I'm going to leave you with an image. Can you imagine Obama emailing Trump about how to handle the country? Not a good idea. Get that he's a private citizen, but really, I just think it's inappropriate. And actually, I added this last thing, listening to somebody talk. I also think it's wildly inappropriate for citizens to stand up here and attack council people. I was hoping somebody would interject, but I would just recommend to you guys, if you have an issue with your council person, talk to them, her, whoever. Because believe me, I can tell you that Councilmember Bruce has been very open to talking to people. So I think it's inappropriate for you to stand up here and attack her. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Jaron Davis.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. It brings a great deal of satisfaction to my heart to see how attentive you are to the comments of the citizens, so thank you for having a listening ear. I'd like to start out by suggesting that Mayor Cullimore is a man that has a great deal of experience, and I think that it would be wise for us to count on that wisdom and take that advice, because he's done that and been there. And so it would only be wise for us to understand that. As it relates to Robbie Russo, I stand in favor of him, knowing that he's done a great job. And that knowledge doesn't just come from me as a resident, it comes from me as a business person who is involved in the community throughout the whole county, and I understand his reputation across there. And for me, as a contract employee, for him to go up to a time close to the expiration of that contract, we'll lose him. He's a rock star, he'll get other opportunities, and it's unfair for us to wait and have him unknowing as to whether or not he will have employment. So I stand and speak in favor of him. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaron. Okay, now that's the last comment card I have. Is there someone who didn't fill out a card who would still like to speak today? Okay, come on up. Just, yeah. Yeah, go ahead and state your name, even though I
Joe
know it.
Bycroft. I live up on Top of the World Drive in, I do believe, Councilwoman Christine McKell's district. I rarely ever hear anything from Councilwoman McKell, but I do appreciate her service, and I understand she's out of town, so yay for her. And I do get contact with Councilwoman Bruce, And I never did get any contact from a former council person, Mr. Tyler. As far as Chief Russo goes, he's got a wonderful police department. He's done a marvelous job, I'm sure. We do have the best police cars in the valley. The other sheriffs and law officers are all jealous, so there's that. But it does need reviewed. And I hope we don't get into a bidding war with another city. I think that's insane. We've watched it with Overstock.com. We've watched it with other companies, Amazon and Microsoft and Facebook, I believe. And they bid up cities to get their taxes cut, and this one is going to be a bid up to get somebody's pay raised. Not that he does it, whether he deserves it or not, I don't know. It's a matter of having actual numbers to look at and listen to, and I think that's something that this council needs to do. But if Chief Russo wants to stay here and he's well paid, great. If he wants to move on to another city and build that police department, I think that's great too, and would wish him well in those endeavors. Either way, he's got great officers, he's got a great community, he can stay or go. It's okay. Someone else will come in, fill those shoes, and do the work. When I retired, the railroad carried on, the trains moved. And, you know, officers come and go, tickets get written, criminals get caught, and unfortunately, sometimes people, unfortunately, like in South Salt Lake recently, pass away. And hopefully that we don't have that happen here. But anyway, please do a proper review. That's all I ask. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Tim Tyler?
Mayor Peterson and council. Once again, my name is Tim Tyler, and I'm here in support of Robbie Russo and our police department. I was a resident here before we became a city, and when we established our own police department, saw I thought a tremendous amount of improvement in response time and the professionalism of the police and just their presence. And as I understand it, it's reflected in also our crime rate in the last number of years too. But anyway, if anyone on the council is looking at not renewing his contract, that would trouble me. But maybe we should just slow down a little bit and maybe send a letter possibly to all the residents of the city and ask them what their thoughts are. Ask them 3 or 4 simple questions and get that response. Most of the city doesn't know this is even being contemplated tonight. And I think that would be a good way to maybe proceed. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we got a couple more coming in. Eric, come on up.
Hello, Council. Well, what I'm hearing a lot about is the personal people like, you know, Bobby Russo, the chief, or, you know, they're asking questions about some kind of review, and I'm actually surprised that there really no review of a department by the city council, because that's actually to me the most surprising part of it all, and I don't know if you want to answer that.
Well, I think we'll have some comments in a moment when we get to that issue, but it's, okay. You know, there's definitions of reviews and there's definition of reviews, so we'll deal with that in a moment.
Okay, because since I'm not aware, you know, if there is or there isn't, that's why, you know, it's one of the surprises that I have. One of the things is it shouldn't be about a person, it should be about the chief of police, the position, the office. It should be about a department. It's not about support or not, and it should never be personal. It's about what's best for the cities and for the residents of the community. And that should be determined, and that's the job of the council. And just like when I spoke here about the budget and the issues regarding, you know, the police department, the questions was about a cost-benefit analysis, about following a procedure and having a structure about how to make decisions. Which is your job. And ultimately, it has nothing to do with Mr. Russo himself. I think the question is more about, are we actually following some sort of process and making everybody in this room familiar with that process and letting them have the, with the transparency, letting them have that information available to them to see that their interests are being represented through you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, now Eric is the last card I have. Is there someone else who has not had an opportunity to speak who would still like to? All right, come on up. Please state your name and maybe your address, if you will.
Hi, I'm Janet Moss, and I live on Cavalier Drive.
Okay, thank you.
And I've been a resident of Cottonwood Heights for about 40 years. I see nothing wrong with doing a review. I have nothing against the police department. I've really had, fortunately, no interaction, so I can't make a judgment, but I really think that a review should be done. It's done in other jobs. I worked as a registered nurse, and I had a job review. And it's just the way it is in business, and I think it should be that way in the city. Also, I have a question about salary. Is there a proposal for a salary increase that would go along with this? Because a lot of us have had experience with our jobs, and you're called in and you have a review, but you also have a salary review and perhaps an increase. So I would like some answers on that. Otherwise, we've lived here peacefully and enjoyed the neighborhood. And I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. We have one more. Someone who wanted to speak? Come on up. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian Roderick, resident 31 years. Maybe this isn't the forum to bring this up at. I'm not sure if it is or not, but I really enjoy golfing in the summer, and I enjoy snowshoeing in the winter. And 2 years ago, they locked the gate on the golf course. I can't snowshoe at Old Mill anymore. And I didn't know if that was a county or a...
It's a county golf course, yeah.
Okay. So I had to bring it up with them to...
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Talk to me, I can give you the number. All right, any other comments from my audience? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I really don't know how to address this diplomatically, but I think it's wrong of people to assume because Mrs. Bruce owns a bar or bars that somehow is against her reputation. I have a son. He has owned Area 51 downtown for 20 years. He's an upstanding citizen. He lives in Cottonwood Heights. And I don't see, he'd make a great person to contribute to the meeting, but he works. He has 3 different kinds of businesses. And I don't think it's right to cast dispersions on someone because they have a business you don't approve of. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you. All right, please no applause. We don't need that. Thank you. Be respectful for everyone. Everyone has a right to have their opinion, and we have the right to respectfully agree or disagree, and that's the great thing about this process. Any others who would like to make comments tonight? Well, I think if you've already spoke, I think that's enough. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Anyone else who has not spoken who would like to speak? Come up, thank you. Please state your name, thank you.
Hi, my name is Tony Worthington. I live on 6675. I have had several problems with domestic violence. It's been a very difficult couple of years with my divorce. I have a very difficult son who I've had to call the police on. They have been amazing to my son. They have been amazing to me. Their response time has been very quick. I am so grateful to them, and I just want to make sure that I'm grateful to Robbie and to the team. I'm very happy about their response. So that's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else who hasn't spoken? Okay.
My name's Linda Brooks. I'm in on Kings Hill Circle. My concern is my taxes and what it's costing, the increase in what it's costing to live in Cottonwood Heights. You know, we just had I just paid my taxes, so I'm very aware of it, and everyone else is too. My concern is, here there was a concern that Cottonwood Heights was underwater. Now they've voted to raise our taxes, and they were talking about cutting a police officer and cutting, one of the suggestions was to cut firemen from each one of the stations. So where's the money coming from to pay for a raise or for, I mean, I have nothing, I think the Cottonwood Heights police are doing a wonderful job, but my concern is financial. So what's the explanation and how do you justify the costs along with, you know, the cuts?
Okay, thank
you.
you. Appreciate that very much. Again, last call, someone who has not had the opportunity to speak who would like to. Okay, hearing none, we encourage all of you to stay around for the topic of business. We have 3 items, but before we do that...
Mayor, do you mind if I give my comments before we proceed?
Well, I think it would be appropriate because I think all the council members would like to make their comments. So,
before the vote?
So I think it would be appropriate to make it with the vote, unless you really like to do it now.
I just hate to keep everybody here.
Well, I think it'll be just a couple minutes, because I've been asked by each council member who would like to make a statement tonight as well, if that's all right. So we have 2 reports. Stay around. I know each member of the council would like to make a statement regarding the important issue. So we definitely would plan on doing that. So we have first our finance director who has a report. We'll do that, and then we'll go with our UFA report, and then we'll have those action items real quickly here.
I guess we'll know in 3 or 30 minutes whether we made it, whether Tim made a good choice. No pressure at all, Scott.
Okay, this is Scott Jurgis, right?
Yes.
And he's our new city finance director. So if you have questions on finance, feel free to grab him after.
Looks like the timer went off. So
Right?
You got 3 minutes.
So, good evening, council members and mayor. I'm glad to be here. This is going to mimic the financial reports that you've seen in the past. I was able to be here actually for the last one for a moment and saw that. And I'm still familiarizing myself with the finances of the city. They're not something that's totally simple and easy to get in a matter of a few days or a few hours. So I am getting there. But I'm starting to get a good understanding of what's going on as I work with the various department directors, and I want to applaud them and my staff for helping to make things work from a financial perspective, as well as each of you. The report that you have before you and that's shown up here on the TVs and the monitors is is representative of where we sit at the end of October. Some of our revenues come in a little bit late, specifically taxes. The sales taxes are on a little bit of a delay in when they get to us. Some of the property taxes are on a delay until about this month to next month when the bulk of them come into us. And so we look at a lot of these things according to the trends of how they have come in the past to see are we following that trend and what have you. expenditures fall out a little bit more in line with a monthly trajectory, unless they're capital in relation, and then they could be all over the place depending on where that capital project may be. But I don't know if there's anything specific that I want to go to in this, but maybe if I could go forward to just a couple of pages in here. And this is in our fund balance. And this is our projected fund balance near there. It says fund balance expected right near the bottom. We ended our last fiscal year at $3.7 million of unappropriated or available unrestricted fund balance. And that's slightly higher than last year. Last year was at $3.6 million or so. And that's a good thing that we're trending slightly upward in that. And I just wanted to point that out from these pages. The rest of the items that I wanted to go into will be represented graphically on the other presentation. And Dan, if I can have you switch over to that one. Okay, so the first graph that we have on here is sales tax. And, sorry. The first graph that we have here is sales tax. You can see that the first month, July, was much higher than we have been historically, but August was much lower. But the 2 months together are very similar. It's a little bit too early to really get a trend of where we're going with our sales tax, but we're not concerned about where sales taxes are going at this point in time. This next graph is, our municipal energy tax. And this is tracking slightly below our averages and slightly below our budget. However, not in a drastic manner, and still not an overall concern for us in terms of the overall impact on the year at this point in time. The next item here is Class C roads funds, and if you remember, Assistant City Manager Bryce Hatterley I think it was last month, if I remember correct, talked about this, that our trends are a little bit low, and we now have two receipts of funds on this. They pay us in 2-month increments. And this is trending a little bit below the last 2 years, and last year was very, very close to what we're budgeted this year. So that is, from my perspective, a little bit concerning, but because we're probably, if this holds true for the year, we'll probably be slightly below what our budget is. Not from a drastic, from an overall dollar standpoint, I'm thinking maybe $100,000, but it does look like we're trending at just a slight bit low on this Class C road funds. Again, this is probably attributable to higher growth areas, adding a lot more lanes of traffic and things along those lines, and vehicles that are getting better gas mileage as vehicles get newer and things like that, and there's less money that's collected as this is directly related to the amount of fuel that's sold. The general fund expenditure trend versus the budget, this follows the green line, and it does not show that we are spending more than what we expect to or on our budgets. It shows that we're spending approximately in line with both our historical trends and with our expected budget during this year. Looking at it from types of expenditures, this specifically is our compensation. Payroll is trending almost right on year over year from our actual versus our budget in this year, and benefits are actually slightly under what we had budgeted. And that's probably due to a couple open positions that we've had at various times through the year where benefits would track slightly low, and some time used to compensate for those open positions, keeping the salary about in line there. And then the final item that I'm going to show is our departmental expenditures, showing our general government, public safety, public works, and community development, all trending slightly below what is budgeted, which is where we want to be. We don't want to be in a situation where we're showing that we're trending above. And these are all in our general fund areas and stuff. And so it looks like that we're in good shape from what I can see at this point in time. Are there any questions that are related to any of these items that I might be able to answer or look up if I don't know the answer?
Just one comment. And correct me if I misspeak, but I just wanted to make sure you talked about a $3.7 million fund balance. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a misunderstanding there. From that amount, we're required by law to have a reserve that we can't expend except in an emergency, and that's
We're required to have a 5%.
Yeah, it's 1.2 or $1.3 million. We also have another fund reserve for when an employee is terminated or leaves and they have PTO or other benefits that are still due them that we accrue.
That is correct.
And that also is, I guess, tallied against that. It's not just cash that we're.
Yeah, it's $500,000, yeah.
Yes. My understanding as well is that you have $1.7 million and change there that's related to CDRA and CDA.
Yes, the
money as well.
$3.7 million.
Well, then we're a lot tighter than even I was thinking.
The $3.7 million is directly related to just the general fund, not the CDRA monies.
Thank you.
And it's the undesignated portion that excludes the amounts that have been talked about here.
Yeah, super. Thank you.
So.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
Since we, Scott's new on the job, since we have a big group here tonight, I just want everybody to know that he has the capability and the intent to give us line item budgeting that I've been asking for from day one that we weren't able to get in the previous year. So I'm ecstatic that you're here, and we're really excited to have higher levels of transparency and accountability across the board.
Agreed.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Good. All right. Thank you, Scott.
And I'll get used to not responding to that every time I hear my name.
Scott, yeah.
The mics around here are used to it.
All right. The next item is the UFA report. Chief Watson.
Thank you, Dan. Mr. Mayor, Council, good evening. I appreciate your time as I present the October fire report. Here's the footprint that shows how our stations lie within the rest of the UFA footprint. You can see Station 110 came in the number 6 position. Station 116 came in the number 15 position. As we break down those calls, this is the number of fire calls with both stations combined, and you can see we capture the past 5 years, so you can see where we landed in October of 18 with 44 calls compared to the rest of the Octobers. These are the combined medical calls now between both of our stations. They closed at 138. You can see where that lands with the past 4 years, not 5, when we compare it to the same queue. Okay, here is Station 110 now, and their call volume on the 12-month. You can see trend lines in the total are going up as well as the medical and fire calls. So they closed with 123 total calls compared to the 12-month average of 110. 94 of the 123 were medical calls. That's a bit above the 12-month average of 88. And 29 were fire calls, which is a bit above the average of 21.9 for the 12-month. Station 116 now, same snapshot, 12 months. They closed at 59 calls. You can see that even though the trend line is up, the call volume has been dropping since July. 59 calls total compared to the 12-month of 68. 44 of which were medicals, which is below the 50.6 12-month average, and then 15 were fires. Compared to the 17.6, you can see that the call volume drops in the totals, or in the totals and fire. Medical calls actually went up a bit compared to the previous month or two. Here are the medical calls by type. And you can read through all of those at your leisure, but you can see the number 1 position are falls at a value of 26. And then unknown is the third category to call volume value of, traffic accidents are second, call volume 18. And then man down or unknown problem in the third position at 17. Here's how those calls compare to 1 year ago, October. Falls, traffic accidents, both in the number 1 and 2 positions. And then the third position, as I stated, this year's October is the unknown or man down. Here are the fire calls. Alarms closed at 16 in the number 1 position. Number 2 position is a huge category, but hydrant problems, public assist, flooding, and then the number 3 position by a long shot were agriculture and barbecue and trash fires. This is what it looks like when we compare October 2018 with 2017. Alarms and the flooding hydrant problems, again, the number 1 and 2 categories similar to each other, and then the category changed in the number 3 position. Station 110, ambulance transports. So of the 30 advanced life support calls, 14 were transported. Of the 64 basic life support calls, 32 were transported. And so we had a total 46 transports of 94 medical calls for 48.9%. This is what they look like now in the 12-month view with those graphs. You can see total transports at 46, 14 of which were ALS, 32 were basic life support. We have seen advanced life support transports go down a bit lately, and we actually are putting a new response model into place here shortly, which will address that. Total ambulance transport monthly percentages now for Station 110. You can see they closed again at 48.9% compared to the monthly, the 12-month average of 49.1. Slight trend line down. And then we go to Zone 116. Total transports were 17, 10 of which were ALS, 7 of which were BLS, and you can compare those values to the 12-month. And you can see they fall just short of the 12-month averages there for the month. Here is total ambulance transports for Zone 116 by percentage. They closed at 38.6. You'll see that's the lowest percentage thus far in the 12-month comparison, and the 49.9% 12-month average is quite a bit higher. You'll recall their call volume was down quite a bit as well when you looked at that first slide. Here's the customer service report. Station 110 had a couple tours for 46 people. They had 4 off-site visits. The 1,200 plus people comes into play when they, as you know, they participated in the trunk or treat Halloween event. And then, as you can see, they also had some talk and demos, Willow Creek Montessori, Home Depot Kids Club, and South Valley Unitarian Autumn Festival. Station 116 had 2 station tours as well. And then they had 3 off-site visits for 88 people. Those visits were at the Intermountain Christian School, and then they went to the Impressions Preschool a couple of times. Here are the fire prevention activities. I'll let you surf through those at your leisure and let me know if you have any questions about that. The safety message has to do with falls and our senior population and some of the things for folks to do to make their homes a little bit safer and try to avoid those issues. I'm really excited to show you this slide. This is the brand new fire engine at Station 116. A couple of things I'll point out here. This is a Rosenbauer brand, but in this slide, you wouldn't even know this is a fire engine. Typically, on a fire engine, oh my goodness me, sorry. You would see just behind where it says Medic Engine 116, just behind the cab is where you'd see all the controls for the pump panel. This has a rear pump instead of a side pump, so that rear compartment on this side is the pump panel, and then you can see discharge connections in the very rear of the engine. This allows the engineer a better view of the scene and able to see what's going on a little bit better. We're really excited about the compartmentalization of the apparatus too. So we received 2 new engines and put these into service about 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. Station 116 got one of them, and Station 126 got the other one.
And they stole your thunder. I actually saw it out the other day, and I was like, well, that's new. That's kind of...
Yeah, it's beautiful. Excuse me, Station 125 got the second engine. That completes my report. Do you have any questions or assignments for me?
Just a personal thank you. Received a lot of comments about the efforts of both our public safety departments, both fire and police, and with the Santa Fe apartments. You know, I think that it's rare that you can have something potentially as it could be a catastrophe when you have an apartment ablaze, and having 2 of them in a short period of time, and then the Mutual Aid Society to have mutual aid agreement, I should say, that have so many different departments all respond in a timely fashion, to have very little damage compared to what potentially could happen.
Well, thank you. You've heard me say before, when there's a very large incident, none of us can do it by ourselves. So we're very pleased with our fire department neighbors and the relationship we have with them.
But thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, just a quick note. We have a guest in our audience. It's Councilmember-elect from the County Council, Councilmember Granada. Ann Granada, welcome. Glad to see you here, and we appreciate you visiting us in Cottonwood Heights. Yeah, thank you. All right, now we have 3 action items. The first one, item 4.1, is consideration of resolution 2018-70 approving the creation of a Department of Records, Culture, and Human Resources, directing preparation of related code amendments, and also appointing a director. So Tim, would you like to just introduce that as our new city manager?
Sure, I'm pleased to talk a little bit about this. You know, in my former work in other communities, I've had the opportunity to be involved quite heavily with the records management, human resources areas, as well as events. And so as I've come into the community, as we hired Scott in the finance area, we've looked at other administrative areas. This is one that I knew that there was going to need to be a reorganization, and so I did evaluate this. The context related to that, this wasn't as complicated of an evaluation because of the numbers of individuals, the type of department we wanted to create. With my previous background, it made sense to organize this department into the records, culture, and human resources department. And then in addition to that, we have someone that's very qualified, that's already here on staff, has a master's of public administration, has extensive experience, and that's Paula Melger. And so in evaluating this, I felt like this was a very good reorganization, and that Paula is a good person to lead this department as director, as well as the city recorder. And so that's what I'm recommending, and I think this will be a very positive thing for the community, and I'm excited to work more closely with Paula on this. And
the financial impact?
Related to the financial impact, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I should have addressed that. What we would do is move Paula, if she's appointed tonight, we would move her to a higher grade, but it would be similar pay that she's receiving now, but give her opportunity for growth in that higher grade as time goes on. Right. So it'd be very minimal, minimal increase.
Right. All right. Any questions from the council?
I have a quick comment. I'm thrilled to see Paula assume this role. She's got a depth of talent and wisdom, and she's a tremendous asset to the city. So I'm really excited to tap into her brilliance.
Thank you. Any further comments? Hearing nothing, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we pass resolution 2018-70.
It's been moved. Do we have a second? Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Bruce, seconded by Councilmember Shelton. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Councilmember Shelton?
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken?
Yes.
Councilmember Bruce?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, and Councilmember Michael is excused. All right, the next item is one that we've had a lot of discussion on this evening. It's Resolution 2018-71, which is approving entry into an employment agreement with Chief Robbie Russo. By this resolution, the council approved the city's entry into this renewal of an agreement. I think I want to emphasize at this point, and Shane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that this is an employment agreement. It's not a guaranteed of employment. It outlines a relationship that includes 6 or 7 areas of accountability that have not been there before, which are pretty standard. These areas of accountability are things that we've discussed as a council individually and collectively. It provides that sends a message to our police department of our support, but does not, again, guarantee employment, which means if during further reviews, and we'll talk about that in a minute, if there is cause, that cause then has the same consequence by using progressive discipline. If there is not cause, there is severance, which in a position like this would normally have. I think each member of the council would like to make comments, and so before we vote, I'm going to allow those comments to be made, and we can start with Councilmember Bracken, if you'd be so willing.
First off, thank you for those who have come and spoke. Those of you who are familiar with me and my time on the council, I have been a great supporter of the police department. I am the sole survivor from being on the council under the previous agreement with the sheriff's office, and I would concur with those who had mentioned the increase we've seen in service and response times, and just having our police in town, and what a benefit that is to our community. There have been a couple of comments that have been made about why now, why not a review. I'm not seeing it immediately. It was brought up. Yes, to an extent, we review Chief Russo every single Tuesday night, every week, every interaction. I have worked with him for 14 years. I have been on this council, and he is eminently qualified, and I've been supportive. I've called for this motion of support for him and for our department for quite some time. I think it is definitely due. Part of the timing for right now, as opposed to say in 2 or 3 more months, actually the mayor touched on it, and I think it's very important. Most contracts of this sort, for example, our contracts that we've always had with our city managers have a 6-month severance, or or as they get towards the end of that contract, that kind of gets eliminated. But I can certainly see, I would certainly feel the same way myself if I'm at the end of a contract. I know that it's coming up, that I have 6 or 5 or 4 months left. It's like, is it going to really happen? Am I safe in my job? Am I going to be able to continue to provide for my family and do the things that I have planned for? And so taking it within that 6 month, I think, is probably a little, it's certainly doable. We could do that. But I don't think 1 or 2 months prior to that is egregious at all. The officers in our police department have all had reviews. They get them quarterly, if I understand correctly. I think that's good policy and good practice. One of the other reasons that I think this has become more urgent now than it might not be otherwise, where maybe we could handle this next month, although we only have 1 meeting next month. And then poof, we're into January and we're within that 6-month window, is the political climate that currently exists in the county, state, and to an extent even nationwide. I don't expect that Chief Russo is going to be going off to Indiana or North Dakota or wherever, but it is not easy to find police officers generally. It is very difficult to find good, wonderful police officers. And the same is true of chiefs of police, people with leadership and the experience and the know-how to make a department run really, really, really well. There have been 2 incidents in the last 6 months that bring this particular matter to an urgency for me. You are probably well aware that on July 1, Harriman went live with their own police department. They came to a similar decision we did years ago, and we think we can handle our citizens' needs better ourselves, and that resulted in them needing a new chief, someone who could do a startup. Doing startups aren't easy. Finding someone who can do that with experience is even harder. I don't know if Chief Russo applied, but I I would be very surprised if they didn't at least ask. They'd be, I don't want to comment about that. I think they would be silly not to at least ask. Similarly, Riverton is in the process of doing the exact same thing. I think our chief and our officers deserve our show of support now so that they know that this is a good place to work. It will continue to be a good place to work, and we will be able to continue to serve our citizens and have them have the respect that they currently have for our chief of police and for all of our officers, for his administrative staff throughout the entire department. Thank you.
Councilman Shelton.
Yes, thank you. Unlike Catherine Peterson, I'm not accustomed to speaking to or being heard by thousands, and so I appreciate you hearing me and understanding that this is not my favorite thing to do, especially when it deals with speaking about people individually. And I agree with those who spoke earlier and talked about the difficulty and the sometimes inappropriate challenges that we face when we speak about individuals. And even for that matter, departments. We have good friends who are members of the Unified Police Department, and we respect them and are grateful to them for the good work they do. We should do our best to speak in positive, uplifting ways the best we can. And with that, there are a few things that I want to say, and I'm going to echo some things that have already been said. First, as it relates to review. I suspect that as a council, we have reviewed our police department at a level that's at least as deep and probably deeper than any council that you'll find in this valley. We review them regularly. Weekly, we ask for an accounting of their activities. Monthly, we get a report on their key performance metrics, and we take very seriously our responsibility to provide our community with policing activities, and we review the data that comes to us every month. Most, if not all of us, have spent hours individually with our officers and taken feedback and listened to what they had to say about their job, their work environment, their management. And we're very well aware of how our people feel about their management. We've provided feedback when it was appropriate, and maybe sometimes even when it wasn't, on issues large and small. We have often provided that feedback in an appropriate private forum, but we have been involved with the management at that level. We have provided a budget to every department in the city, including the police department. To my knowledge, the police department, in my time anyway, has never exceeded the amount of money that we allocated them to do their job, and they've done it very well within that budget. As you might expect, police work is sometimes the subject of complaint. It's the nature of the work that there will be people who complain about the enforcement of the law. It's not unique to us, it's not unusual, but when we have those complaints, we take them seriously and we investigate and have looked into them and tried to determine if there was anything that we could do to improve our situation in our department. And I think, in my experience, those complaints have been addressed and looked at, and if there was an opportunity to improve, it was dealt with appropriately. The police department and every department in our city is the subject of a regular audit. That audit determines if they have appropriate financial controls in the business they do. And every year, again to my knowledge, in my time, there have been no findings of any inappropriate nature of the financial controls employed by the police department or for that matter, any of our departments. I think we have done a significant amount of work to know if our police chief is doing a good job. We've been at it a long time, many of us, some of us lesser time, but we have done our work appropriately. What makes me feel bad at this moment is this concept of a review, which some of you have implied might not have been done. In my feeling, and this is my opinion alone, the worst thing about having not had an employment review by his supervisor for Chief Russo is we have not formally told him in writing what a great job we think he's doing. And that's my opinion, but I state it with a lot of conviction. I wish that we had given him, his manager had given him an appropriate review where we could have explained that more directly to him. As it relates to the issue of pay, again, kind of a sensitive subject. We don't generally like to talk about what we pay people, but in the public forum, that is what we do. We speak about pay. And so I just want to give you a few issues. People have some questions about what we're doing here and what we've proposed and why. It's my understanding that Chief Russo is the longest tenured police chief in the Salt Lake Valley. He's been at his job since the beginning of our department as one of our longest tenured employees. His pay range, as of this date, is topped out. That's the way our human resources evaluation has set his pay range. It turns out that as of today, Chief Russo, one of the longest tenured police chiefs in the Valley, is right near the bottom of pay among all police chiefs in the Valley. Now, there are a host of reasons why that's true, but in my mind, the longest tenured, successful, well-run police department should not be led by among the lowest paid employees in his position in the Valley. With this change, some of you may think, well, that's a big change. It's an important change, and even at that change, Chief Russo will move in pay, if approved, to about the middle of those police chiefs in the Valley, among whom he will continue to be the longest tenured. And to me, that is appropriate. It's not been a bidding war. We do believe there are others who are interested in Chief Russo's services. We haven't consulted them, understood what they are offering. That's not what we've done. But we've looked at the competitive environment for people in his position and set the pay based on that idea. It's interesting to me that in today's meeting, we made another change. We approved the creation of a new department and the appointment of a new director. And yet none of the people here came to comment about if that department or that new director had been reviewed. And to me, that highlights something really important in terms of what's going on here and why we sometimes we have a story that goes one way for one reason, and that's my opinion of what's happening here. Scott mentioned why now. Why now is the same why now for the recent change we made a minute ago, which we unanimously approved. Sometimes the business of the city happens at inconvenient, yet nevertheless necessary times. sometimes you have to renew a contract because of the circumstances around what's going on in the world. And our choice to renew this contract today, in my view, is a choice about dealing with exigent circumstances that exist and being sure that we retain an excellent police chief. We have a great department in no small means and as no small result, or no small part, excuse me, as a result of a great leader. And I think you could universally talk to the people who have worked for him. And you know, obviously there'll be always people who have a different opinion. And so universally you couldn't do this. But the vast majority of those who worked for him, who work for him now, will tell you that he is an important reason why they're here, why they're happy here, why they're doing good work here, why those key performance metrics are as high as they are. And I hope he knows and his department know how much we support him and them and appreciate the work they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Shelton. Councilmember Bruce.
Where to start? So to say that our officers, that their key metrics are solely based on the chief, I think we have extraordinary officers here in the city, and they've proven their dedication and their willingness to go above and beyond time and time and time again. I think it's an insult to their professionalism to say that they would shirk their duties or their dedication to the city if we didn't renew the chief's contract tonight. The department is not some kind of fragile organization. These are professionals who are committed to our city, and they deliver results for us day in and day out. I loved hearing the Tyler's stories about success with our Cottonwood Heights Police Department. I don't think anybody's questioning the reputation of our police. I also don't think that anyone is doing a character assessment of Chief Russo. That's not what this is about. This is about process and our failure as a city to conduct regular and timely job performance reviews. To say that we sit at the same table with him week in and week out, and so we know that he deserves a 13.25% pay increase, that's absurd. I have employees that I love and adore, but I don't make willy-nilly decisions about how much pay. It's based on parameters and a very articulate and consistent job performance. It's not a personality contest or a popularity contest. I'd like to address a couple of the things that were directed at me. Two of the ladies complained that they were upset that I'm listening to people who formerly felt disenfranchised. I'd like them to know that they heard me say that I represent those disenfranchised people while they were in attendance at a town hall that I hosted. So to say that I don't listen to and represent everyone is upsetting, to say the least. I do have special interests that I will promote, continue to promote. They include professionalism and transparency. I will continue to advocate for those special interests. We as a city, both past and present, deserve an F in terms of performance. To let a major department, a multi-million-dollar department, go without a formal review for over 6 years, that's an F grade in my reality. Shame on us for not owning up to this shortfall and rectifying it immediately. I don't know a single business in the private sector with a multi-million-dollar budget that would not conduct professional, timely, thorough reviews. We've neglected to do that, and we should be ashamed. We've recently hired Tim Tingy here. He's brilliant. He's ethical. I'm 100% confident that he's going to do a fantastic job, but he's been here for 3 weeks. So to force something of this magnitude and not give him the respect to have 30, 60, 90 days to review a department, I think it's an insult to his credentials. I call into question some of Shelton's comments that the chief's salary was amongst the lowest. I would like to see those numbers. Tonight we're voting to give a $17,000 pay increase. That's over 13%. In my business reality, pay increases averaged 1 to 1.5% per year. If you had a really great year or a big cost of living increase, maybe 2%, 13.25% is extraordinary for a one-time pay increase. It's likely that if we were to grant a review to go forward, that it would demonstrate that all is well in our police department. It's likely that the chief would in fact welcome an opportunity to expound upon the successes of the department. We have phenomenal officers that are acknowledged day in and day out in the press for acts of generosity and good deeds. It's likely that if we provided this level of transparency for our city functions, that it would increase trust between constituents and representatives, between residents and the city staff. I think that professionalism demands that we have this frank conversation. I think professionalism demands review before reward. Professionalism demands that we right our wrongs and we operate at a more professional level. By renewing the contract tonight before these steps have taken place, we're putting the cart before the horse, and we are doing a disservice to our residents.
All right. Thank you from each members of the council. As a member of the council, I'd like to make a couple comments myself before we proceed with the vote. As was mentioned, we spent a long time and went through a serious process of recruiting and hiring what we felt was a true professional as a city manager. We feel we've done that. I applaud our choice. I think he's going to be excellent. That city manager now becomes the immediate supervisor as the CEO of the city of our police chief. This contract extension in no way limits his ability to provide that supervision. And with his help and with the involvement of the chief himself in this agreement, we've outlined areas of accountability. But I'll agree with Councilman Shelton. I don't have, there's all kinds of reviews. Just because you don't have a document on a shelf doesn't mean you have not held people accountable and had a thorough review. I believe without question, we've reviewed our police department and our police chief numerous times on a regular basis. And where we've needed to take appropriate action, we do that. We don't do it publicly, and that's how you handle personnel items. I think tonight's the time to turn the page, move forward, give our city department manager, our city manager, the opportunity to be the leader that we think he'll be, and also send a message loud and clear to our chief and our police department that as a city, as a mayor and as a council, we support them. I think everyone up here has said that we have amazing police department. I heard that quoted numerous times. I don't think you have an amazing police department if you don't have strong leadership in that department. Okay, again, this agreement doesn't guarantee employment. It just gives an assurance that we support them moving forward. And if they're professional, as has been mentioned, then they don't have to worry. They'll be applauded. They'll be recognized. Okay? You know, I go back to the newspaper, I guess, just a couple weeks ago, in the Deseret News, we had the fire at the Santa Fe Apartments. And it quotes the dispatcher of saying that there was an elderly lady in the apartment, and they kept telling her, you need to get out, you need to get out. And they couldn't get her to move out. And then within 5 minutes in that room talking dispatcher was one of our police officers who helped her out of that tragic environment. I hear those stories constantly. That comes from, I believe, strong leadership. I don't think it comes just because we say, go out there and do a good job. You need to have accountability all the way up and down the ranks. Okay, and I think we have that. I think we have good points made by all the council members across. And moving forward, as we turn the page, I think we'll do well. Okay, and I think we need to start coming together and not being as critical with each other and support each other and move forward. We will, as a council, from a new budget process going forward with our new finance director, new city manager, we have a new council. I think the city is in good order moving forward. And we appreciate the comments here. That's the neat thing about municipal government is you're close to us. You can call me on my cell phone. You can call me and I'll meet with you and I'll tell you how I feel. I'm much better one-on-one than I am with a group. But we do listen. We listen aggressively. Okay, we want to do the right thing, the right time for the right reason. I think tonight this contract is the right time for the right reason. And I think we need to do that. I think all of our police officers need to know that we are supportive. Okay, and like Councilman Sheldon has said, we meet with all of them at events and activities. We've done ride-alongs. We know their thoughts and their concerns. And I applaud the accountability measures that are in this agreement. I emphasize those again because they were created. There are some that Callie suggested herself to me, some that our city manager suggested, and they're in there. And Robbie's looked at those and he says, yeah, they're common sense. We would definitely want to do those. So with that, I again restate, it's time to turn the page and move forward and get on with other priorities we have in the city. Thank you.
Mayor, with that being said, I would emphatically move that we approve Resolution 2018-71. I don't do it willy-nilly. I do it emphatically and wholeheartedly.
Okay, it's been moved by Council Member Bracken.
I will second that motion.
Seconded by Council Member Sheldon. Any further comments from the council? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Councilman Shelton?
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken?
Yes.
Councilmember Bruce?
Review before reward. I vote no.
And Councilmember Michael is excused.
Sorry, I said that wrong. Reward before review.
Okay.
It's important that we get that right.
All right, and I will vote yes. Thank you. Okay, I have one more matter of business. Where'd my agenda go? It's Resolution 2018-72. It's approving entry into interlocal agreement for stormwater improvements behind the new Brighton High School construction. We identified some problems behind there where we have some stormwater that doesn't have a way to exit through the Brighton High property. And so this is an agreement with them where they will do the work and we'll reimburse them based upon our approval and with an amount not to exceed $45,000. I think we've talked about that in our work session. Any further discussion on that item? Hearing none, I'd call for the motion.
I move that we approve Resolution 2018-72.
And considering it's basically almost in my backyard, I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Shelton and seconded by Councilmember Bracken. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. Councilmember Bruce?
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken?
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, and Councilmember Michael is excused. Okay, the next item is we have the consent calendar. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar, please.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right, now to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So do I have a second?
Second.
So moved and second, we adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance.
Next.
He did. He walked up, and he's right. Oh, I know who he is.
His name.